This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Before we get into today's show, here's another chat with Dr. Glenn Swartout, a naturopathic healer from Hawaii, this time around suggesting remedies for vision challenges of driving at night.
As we get older, it's one of the things that, we associate with aging. Oh, it's like I'm having a hard time driving at night, maybe avoiding it, glare, and if I get glare of headlights in my eyes or just street lights, it takes me longer to see in the dark. Well, it turns out that that's actually the first symptom of the leading cause of what's called irreversible blindness. Now, we have lots of people that we help reverse, even when they're already legally blind, of macular degeneration. So the textbooks are wrong because you can't prove that something's irreversible, and we've proven that it is reversible. Not in every case, of course. With human health, nothing is 100%. But almost all of the people that we work with macular degeneration are able to improve the health of the eyes, improve the vision. But what we want to focus on here is, let's say you're in your 40s. Most people don't find out they have macular degeneration until they're in their 50s. And then it's 1 out of 7 Americans are diagnosed with it over the age of 50. That's a lot of people. 1 out of 3 over age 75. But what if you're in your 50s, even 40s, let's say, and you're just noticing night driving's not as comfortable? Well, that's the perfect time to do prevention and not have to worry about maybe going blind later on. I've developed a series of remedies for macular wellness. They're called Macular Wellness. And why? There's 7 of them right now. Each one has a different carotenoid. We know that the macula, the center part of the eye, collects certain carotenoids, three of them, from our diet and stores them in that tissue, and it helps prevent macular degeneration, helps keep that tissue healthy. Our regulatory agencies say, well, that we don't call that a vitamin because there's no acute deficiency disease. But there's leading people, a leading chemist from Stanford says we should call it a longevity vitamin, because if we don't have enough of it, we go blind eventually. It's a slow process. So there's no acute or deadly disease, but going blind is enough. We should consider that a problem. So, but there's not just those 3 that a lot of people take: lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin. You'll see those mixed in many formulas for eyes and vision. Well, it turns out all of the carotenoids, there's about 500 of them or so in the diet. They're all absorbed through one single little channel in the small intestine, and they compete. They line up and say, hey, which one are you going to absorb? Can I get in, or can I get in? So when we put 3 in one formula, we're going to probably absorb one better than the others, and we're kind of wasting that supplement. So we separate them so we know which one can be absorbed, and we can actually test people energetically and see which one their body needs and wants. And again, it's not just those 3 that everybody is taking and knows about. In fact, the research shows there's one carotenoid, only one, that people who get macular degeneration are deficient in, and that's a different one. That's lycopene, the one you get from tomatoes. So you can eat like 5 pounds a day of vine-ripened tomatoes. If they're tomatoes that are grown in a hot house and then they use a gas to make it look red, there's not much lycopene in there. But in any case, like I had a practitioner I was working with. She was having a little bit of night driving challenge, not in her 40s, not diagnosed with anything. But she tested energetically for one of the macular wellness formulas, and she noticed her night vision was improving. She could drive at night comfortably again.
If you have a particular health question you would like to ask Dr. Glenn and would like to know what is the best natural remedy to use instead of toxic pharmaceuticals, you can email me your question at kwgruber@yahoo.com. And you can go to his website, remedymatch.com, to purchase one of Dr. Swardout's products. As a listener of World Awakenings, make sure to use the discount code AWAKE, that's all capital letters, AWAKE, to receive your 10% off discount. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You've found it. You are in the right place. This is the show World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. I'm your host, Carl Gruber. Now, since 2018, we have brought you one-on-one chats with some of the world's top experts, teachers, masters, and specialists in the world of spirituality, metaphysics, enlightenment, and healing. And now you can not only watch this show on YouTube, but also on the brand new TV network, New Reality TV. Just scan the QR code you now see on the screen to learn how you can subscribe to New Reality TV today. And also, World Awakenings is proud to have been chosen the #2 most popular metaphysical podcast in the world by feedspot.com. So thank you for that, guys. So let's check in with our guest, and that is Sean Callahan. He is our guest for episode number 207, and he is the founder and CEO of USA Medbed and Healing Life Technology, as well as the host of the YouTube podcast USA Medbed 369. Now, for more than 25 years, Sean Callahan has been helping patients, caregivers, and medical professionals obtain quality medical equipment at a fraction of the cost. As his knowledge and exposure to new and alternative vibrational frequency and Tesla energy healing technologies grew, he began to see the powerful effects these healing technologies had on his patients. He also runs a healing technology clinic and a storefront featuring numerous alternative healing modalities. And with that, welcome to World Awakening, Sean. Glad to have you here.
Oh, hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and been looking forward to catching up with you.
Well, absolutely, and I am excited about this too, because what you're doing, I think people can see in the background all the cool stuff you got there. But before we get into all of the amazing healing modalities you do and offer, I'd like to find out more about how Sean Callahan came to be so interested in the art of healing.
Yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting story, and I'm glad you asked. Fortunately, before we went live today, I was able to just walk you through briefly a portion of our facility here. And as you see, I'm still deeply involved in the medical industry. In fact, this morning I got an email from the Philippines, a hospital looking for a heart-lung machine. So after we get off this call today, I'll be trying to track down a heart-lung machine for a hospital overseas. But one of the things that I also was able to show you, and one of the things that you see that we've got in the medical section of the building, are ICU beds. Now, we get beds and move beds by the thousands, and a lot of those do go overseas in international hospitals. So along the way, there's been a lot of hospitals that we've been blessed to be a part of building and setting up in Africa and other parts of the world. But we're one of the only companies in the United States that you can get ICU beds from if you're really in bad shape. And in the situation that the world is in right now here, if you get out of the hospital and you're really in bad shape, the chances are that what you're going to get from your insurance provider is not going to be adequate to take care of critical care needs. And when I say critical care, I'm referring to quadriplegic, paraplegic, stroke, Alzheimer's, ALS, people that are diagnosed with really serious health issues. And so we fill the gap, and we provide these hospital beds to patients all over the United States and all over the world. And so for the last 15 plus years with the beds part of it, we're dealing every day with people that are going to get into a hospital bed and very likely might not ever get out of it. And so for me personally, I'm kind of one of those guys that's pretty open. I think I talked to you before we jumped on, and I know you're in Ohio. I grew up in Indiana and mostly in Minnesota, Wisconsin. And so, we basically try to facilitate getting beds and getting equipment into places where it's badly needed. And I think that, kind of hearing this terminology of what is a med bed and med beds and this whole med bed thing kind of sent me on a very inquisitive journey where I said, I really want to dig into this whole subject. I'm hearing a lot about it. I want to know kind of what is the bottom line? Is this stuff really out there? And if it is, what is it? Where is it? And that's, really kind of how this whole thing started, is really because when I'm dealing with these patients, I think the number one thing that people need to recover and to heal is they need hope. And they need to know that there's something out there that might be there, that might be something that they're not aware of. It might be something that's in the alternative segment of technology, that maybe there is something there that can help me. And maybe there's something that I can find that most people don't know about. And when you really start deep diving into this stuff, what you're going to find is that there is a lot of technology that's out there now. Some of it's been out for over 100 years. And when you delve into this subject, you really cannot delve into it without being simultaneously in past, present, and future. Because in order to understand what's out there now, you're going to get into a history lesson, which we can talk about in a little bit. But then you're going to see what's present, and then you're going to see how that's developing the future, where this whole thing is going. And so there's simultaneously many different, I want to say, confluxes of time that are all intersecting in this subject, which I also find fascinating. And it really turns you into a history buff, right? Because when you start diving into this, what you're going to find is that, number one, some of the most powerful, what I would put in quotes, medbed type technology is actually inscribed in hieroglyphics in Egypt. So these plasma energy systems, which are incredibly powerful, clearly were being used thousands of years ago. We're rediscovering this technology now, and that has to do with the work of Nikola Tesla, and it has to do with other greats, Georges Lakhovsky, Royal Raymond Rife. So then you start learning, and these are names that most people will probably have never heard. Tesla, of course, is very popular, but I think, for even somebody like myself, the main things that I always heard about Tesla were the death ray and, some of the defense contractor projects that he was working on that were really intense. But I don't think really understood from a very base ground level the amount of work that Tesla did just for health and wellness, and how that technology has influenced the technology that we've got today, which really does kind of sink in with this whole medbed. And when I say medbed, even, Carl, I really like to redefine that so we have a clear understanding of what that is. It's a very general term, and medbeds could be considered hospital beds, which we obviously deal with. But a medbed technically is an energy and frequency-based technology, which is basically sending information to the body so that the body can do what the body is so good at, which is heal, recover, and get into what we would call homeostasis, which is perfect health. That's how we're all scripted. That's the blueprint of our DNA. So, with all that being said, the whole thing really for me came about from dealing with really seriously ill people and going on this journey and kind of going down this whole subject, which then, as you can see, I am fascinated by it. I think it's an absolutely amazing subject, and I've been very blessed to have met a lot of really highly intelligent people, physicists, scientists from all over the world. And so that has really become a real passion of mine because of, number one, wanting to help people, but really also because of what I've seen happen with individuals that have had access to this technology, not even through me, but through others. You mentioned John Baxter, who's a good friend. I work with a lot of other facilities, a lot of other technologies around the country and around the world.
Whoa, man, you really hit the ground running here. Amazing.
And we did the 100-yard dash right there.
Well, yeah, really, and you kind of already answered a whole bunch of questions I have for you, but I would like to just go back for a moment. I mean, what was your initial impetus, maybe as a young man, that drew your attention to healing?
I think really what it comes down to is just being a loving and compassionate person. I mean, healing can be something as simple as, picking up a bird that's on the side of the road that has a broken wing. It can be something as simple as opening the door for a person, or helping an elderly person across the road. I think the healing part of it is a subtitle. I think the main title is being compassionate and being a loving person. I think the healing aspect of it comes to different people in different ways because we do run across people that are out there, what I call in service to others. I feel like, with what you're doing is service to others, right? So there's a part of you that says, look, I know that there's really good knowledge and information out there for the general public. And I know that if I can help get that information to these people, I can help them live a fuller, better life, And so the healing part of it, but healing can also be done through knowledge, right? And so channels like yours where you're spreading really good knowledge and timely knowledge, right? Like the saying that we usually have is that you didn't find the podcast found you, because there was something in Carl's show today that you needed to hear. And there was a message that was timely for you in this manner. So I think, I just think, growing up in the Midwest, I just feel like people in the Midwest are very loving, compassionate people. I feel like that environment growing up in the Midwest is good. Now I'm living in Virginia, which is the South, which I've been in 7 years. And uh, I can't say enough beautiful things about Southern culture and the upbringings that people have in the South, which is also about being loving, compassionate, doing the right thing and helping others. I think it's just part of our DNA of what our task is here in this lifetime that we're sort of born into. And I think that everybody at any place at any time can play a role in being healing. Healing can be done with compassionate words, kindness. It can be done with, a big smile and being there for somebody when they're in a bad spot. So I feel like this is the role that I've fallen into, but I like to acknowledge everybody out there because at any moment in time, we can all be a healing and a loving person. And I think that that's the one component that as we develop that and it grows and we all become more loving towards each other, that's when things really start manifesting on the planet as a whole. And I think we're making great strides and great progress. I think we're it's interesting, in a third dimensional reality, we probably have never been in a crazier time on the planet Earth right now. I mean, it is absolutely bonkers.
Yes.
But I find that for me personally, it's a very challenging time to be what you say you are, right? And so if you grow up and you say, I'm this adjective, I'm that adjective, me personally, I was brought up Catholic, um, then live it. Then be that compassionate person, be that person that's forgiving, be that person that's not judging, be that person that instead of is, getting into tittle tattle with, opinion-based reality, be the person that loves that person anyway. Because, Carl, I'm 59 years old. I grew up in a time where it didn't matter what you believed. Everybody was compassionate. And even though I might not agree with it, it never became something that was provocative or turned into an argument. We just accepted each other for who we are. So I think that, if we can spin back into that mode and that reality and that mindset, and I don't mean to get off the subject of the technology, but I do feel that the mentality of our reality and our technology is somewhat connected. So I do believe that there is a part of that that's all kind of part of the overall mission here that we're all performing, trying to do our best and make the world a better place.
And technology is only useful if we combine it with beautiful human compassion and intelligent use.
You know what? That is the most important thing. That comes first. The technology comes second. So that whole part of it, of being in a loving, compassionate realm, is the most important part, because there's many times that if that gets delivered first, there is no need for technology. The thing about the technology, which I find interesting getting into this subject, is that, and this is why I'm really super happy to be on the call with you today, you have to unlock the technology within you, right? You have to unlock the spiritual powers and gifts that you've been giving as a spiritual being here having a third dimensional human experience. And Carl, you are very hip to this because we live in the same world with uh, um, Louis Hay and Bob Proctor and all these brilliant, brilliant people. I like to get in Napoleon Hill, Neville Goddard, who I've really just completely fallen in love with, Neville Goddard. More recently, there's a guy named Tom Kieran who's got a podcast called Be Something Wonderful, where he brings all that together. But, you know, you could buy the technology here. You could buy some of this amazing Tesla technology, Carl. I would give you a set of instructions and say, have at it. But where is the instruction manual for us as human beings to unlock the potential and the gifts and all the amazing things that we have the ability to do? That comes from being on your podcast. That comes from understanding that you are in complete control of every second, past, present, future of your reality, and that everything and anything is possible at any given second. And you are the one who ultimately determines the reality that you create for yourself. You know, when you start getting into where this technology really goes, it gets into clairvoyance, it gets into the collective consciousness, it gets into lucid dreaming, it gets into the ability for you to even tap into Akashic records. It gets into the part where you just become a more loving and compassionate person, because that is a frequency, right? Depression is a frequency, anger is a frequency. All these things are frequencies. And what you find is that the general census right now on the planet is that keeping us locked into a fearful or angry or frustrated, you know, those are all frequencies. And you have to be able to supersede that third dimensional reality, look at it and say, but as a spiritual being, I know that my frequency and my compassion and loving frequency is what really is going to make the world change. And so understanding that, unlocking that, and then being able to send love and compassion. You know, some of the greatest stories ever are through prayer. And prayer, really, in many senses, according to Neville Goddard and all of us, is the ability to send loving, healing, frequency energy to people. So I do feel that although the technology is amazing, and I'm like a 59-year-old kid in a candy store, every day I come to my office, I'm like coming down the stairs and it's Christmas and I've got all these toys here to play with and I love them dearly. But I do feel that it's secondary to understanding the potential that we all have as spiritual beings, getting that user manual, understanding that, being on podcasts like yours where you disseminate that knowledge and staying present in that moment, because it's very easy to hear this stuff. It's even more difficult to live it and be in that moment. And it's very, you know, we've been programmed where, you know, since we're kids, that this isn't possible, that's not possible. We kind of get put in this box of reality, but you have to be able to expand beyond that box. And when things start going sideways, and that's the way life is, but when you get into those modalities where I'm frustrated, oh my God, how am I going to pay this bill or whatever? You've got to be able to understand that you've moved into that frequency. And in that frequency, it's going to be more difficult to find the solution that you're looking for. Understanding that part of it and being conscious of it, and then shifting out of it, saying, okay, I'm going to put on some great music. I'm going to shift out of this. I'm going to start thinking through potential realities. I'm going to think through the ultimate outcome that I want to achieve from this. And I'm going to live as if it's already a present tense. And I'm going to try to do that as best I can. And it's a process, because just as you're learning how to live that reality, there's other realities that we've been told are kind of where we stay in that box. So I'm sorry to keep going on with these really long answers, but you know, I feel like this is very connected. And the other part of that is that healing first starts within the mind, right? So you already have to visualize, number one, the hope thing is really important, because if I get people that come in that are locked in their mind, and this is very interesting, actually, Carl, it's almost like I'm doing case studies, but I get a lot of the people, because I've got a fully stocked showroom and place here, I get a lot of people that come in with these ailments that I was talking about, right? I had a guy here that had ALS 3 or 4 or 5 days ago. His goal was he wanted to die comfortable, you know, like that's a very humbling thing to hear. And this guy's already kind of accepted that. But even though I've got some of the most beneficial technology on the planet 25 feet away, even bringing it up, they're already locked into that reality. They are locked in that this is it. There's nothing that can be done. I'm accepting this reality. I've got some amazing technology. I'm not even sure if it will work if your brain and your mind is locked into shutting down. Like, I can overcome a lot of stuff, but I can't overcome the power of the mind. And on the flip side, that's also very important for people that say, I know I can do it. And, we've got great stories. Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think, is one that I like to bring up a lot. The guy that broke his back, that was told you'll never walk again, was given this really, sad diagnosis. And he just said, no, I will, and I am going to walk again. And he visualized that he's walking again. And he literally did with his mind, and he's very well documented, was able to program his body and say, no, you will heal and you are going to do this. So the mind part of it is a very important component, and that needs to come along for the ride. And when that's in the right place, the technology then at that point is going to be much more useful.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up the spiritual aspect and all of those things. We have to combine the compassion and human love, not only for ourselves but for everybody involved. But one thing I really find interesting is you are, you provide traditional healing health products to hospitals and people around the world, but now these alternative healing modalities you're doing, like the vibrational and energy healing and Tesla electric energy technologies, how did those first come to you? How did you find out about them in the first place? Most people have no clue about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, like I said, you have to, like with Tesla, I love anything that has to do with Nikola Tesla and his life. And when you start delving into it, there's a lot of technology. I would say that, I was very fortunate because I started looking out for people that were, very prominent in the industry. And John Baxter, who we brought up his name earlier, was one of the first guys that I ran into, and he had already been ahead of me and done a lot of research. Now, one of the technologies that I showed you coming into this is one of our wellness rooms, if you will. But the multi-wave oscillator is one of Tesla's most incredible inventions. And that's technology that's over 120 years old, that has a lot of documentation. There was a lot done with those technologies, the multi-wave oscillator. You have some really brilliant scientists, right? So one of the things, Carl, that we know through the body is that your cells vibrate. I mean, technically, everything in reality and creation vibrates, but your cells vibrate, right? And a healthy cell, we'll just say, vibrates at 15,000 vibrations per second. Well, these guys back in the day, and this is over 100 years ago, figured out that this cell vibration was a big deal. And when you started becoming unhealthy, the vibrational rate of the cell was going down. And so they figured out, wow, if you're becoming unhealthy and the cell vibration is going down, and as that goes down, you are going down, if we can restore the vibration of the cell, we could probably restore people back to good health. And so the multi-wave oscillator was based on that premise. Now, the interesting thing, when you get into a couple little fun stories about Tesla's working in his lab, and he's doing all of his work. He's working with plasma energy, which we can talk about, which is very powerful. But he's noticing fruits and vegetables on the countertop have been sitting there for almost a month, and they're not spoiling. And these are things like, that normally would have spoiled within a week or 10 days, and they're lasting for a very long period of time. So he's thinking, okay, there's clearly something that I'm doing that's in here that's affecting the molecular structure of these vegetables and fruits that are in here. And that's one of the first clues that he had, that there was something going on that possibly could affect also what was going on within the body. And so this whole thing with the vibrational rate of the cell came about also with a guy named Georges Lakhovsky, who Tesla handed these notes off. Now, Lakhovsky was a brilliant scientist from Russia, and he did most of his work primarily out of France. But what they did is Tesla started going through and figuring out, what are these frequencies? And he started looking in, because he knew at the time that there were certain frequency sets that he was running. So what they did is they created these discs. They're called multi-wave oscillators once again, but those discs almost look like a candy cane, and they have 12 rings on them. They start real large, and then they shrink down into a small concentric little rings at the very middle. But each one of those is one of the most beneficial frequencies that they found for the body. Every part of the body has a frequency that it sort of dances to, is kind of the term I like to use, that resonates with that part of your body. So your kidneys are different than your brain, which is different than your cartilage and what have you. So they knew if we can culminate these primary base frequencies into the body, it'll be very beneficial. Then what we'll do is we'll put these discs on each side, create a field that can get these cells to start going back to their maximum potential. And then the last thing that we'll do is we'll create a field that has electrical energy, because everything in our body runs on electricity. And so in order to recover, heal, all these different things, you need electrical energy. All of us have been sick at one point in time. You know, when you got the flu and you're not feeling well, you're on low energy. You're low energy because your body says, I need that energy to recover from this flu. And therefore, I'm tapping out, and you're not going to have the same amount of energy to go run or do whatever you normally do. So we can clearly, we've all felt that. So when you're 30 years old, you run on about 100 millivolts of electrical energy. When you're 70 years old, you run on about 30 millivolts of electrical energy. They understood that sending electrical energy in the body was not only good for longevity, but it was very important for the recovery process. And so putting people in these fields, which they did. Now they developed these, Lakhovsky built these in the 30s up until the start of World War II. They put these in hospitals in New York City where they had phenomenal results. And Tesla and him basically built this. But the interesting part of that is that, you know, you're working on very simple premises of physics. This is not a stretch. This is very clearly simple, basic ABC understandings that everything runs on a frequency, including your cells in your body. And they had amazing success. So that, you know, was really one of the main technologies that, you know, I started learning about. But as you learn about that, you simultaneously go, oh, and by the way, Tesla worked on this and Tesla worked on that. And I could go on. I mean, there's another technology actually that's very powerful that Tesla made, which is, it's called a shaker plate. And it's just a very simple device that just shakes you. You stand on it and the whole platform shakes. And what it does is it makes you have to drop down into kind of what we'd call like a horse stance, where you have to bend your knees and kind of hold down low because you're shaking. And what that does is it does a lot of stuff for cleansing the lymphatic system. We use it a lot to reestablish the neural pathways for people that have had strokes. So if you've had a stroke and the left side of your body is knocked out, getting on that shaker plate will start sending those messages from the bottom of your foot all the way up to your brain, where you can reestablish getting mobility back, which is a very powerful thing. We've got some amazing testimonials on that. But one of the interesting things it also does is it helps build muscle mass. And one of the biggest problems with older people is that they lose muscle mass. And when they lose muscle mass, they lose longevity. And when you lose muscle mass, you're also losing basically your skeletal frame. Your body is atrophying, right? So I feel like this is important technology for a lot of different things. Now, they use those shaker plates for Olympics. Like the Russians were using those because 10 minutes on that thing at high rev is equal to like running for an hour. But it's really important in my world for men and women, especially in my age group. I'm 59, like I said, but 1/3 of women that break their hip are never going to walk again. That is a staggering statistic. And why is that? It's because they're losing muscle mass primarily. And when they lose muscle mass, number one, they're also losing bone density. And you don't have the cushion to fall on when you go off to the side. You don't have muscle in there. You're losing muscle mass. Your bone is weak. And so, you know, some of these technologies are very simple in nature. They don't have to be, you know, plasma energy crazy, like just some really core basic stuff, which is keep your muscles strong, keep your legs strong, keep walking. If you use that, great. If you don't, stay active, right? A really important part of it. But when you get into the Tesla technology, and the shaker machine actually is a funny one, because if anybody's familiar with Tesla, Samuel L. Clements, AKA Mark Twain, was a good friend of his. Tesla had a lot of famous people come through his lab. And one day, Clemens comes in and he's showing him this shaker machine. And Samuel L. Clemens he's like, don't stay on it for more than 10 minutes, he says. Clemens is like, oh, I can do it. I can stay on this thing long. And he's trying to show off. And eventually he has to run off and go use the bathroom because it's also cleansing you out internally and externally, which is kind of a funny story there. But, the Tesla technology is the core base for our generation. But what you find is what we're really dealing with right now is second and third generation scientists. So you've got scientists that took the work at Tesla, which was a vast amount of information. And then you had second generation people pick up that work and say, okay, here's his notes. Let's pick up where he left off and let's push this forward. Then you have second generation scientists. One of the greatest of them in the second generation realm was a gentleman named Antoine Prairie. Antoine Prairie was a French gentleman, worked with the French government, had over 5,000 case studies working with plasma energy technology, and had amazing results, all very well documented. Anything that I talk about, anything that I do is not only documented by physics, it's also documented by history, because all these things were very well documented. They're just not mainstream. But if you want to dig in and say, I want to check out the work of Anton Prairie, or I want to check out the work of George Zlikovsky and many books and other things written, and then there was a lot of cool things that went on with Anton Prairie. When you get into plasma, you get into time reversal, you get into some really like metaphysical subjects. And now we're working with dual tube technology, which is third generation, where the gentleman that I work very closely with is a scientist named Dan Winter, who's a former IBM guy and very well documented gentleman, probably in his mid 60s, 70s, I'd say. But he's a master level PhD that's taken on the work of Prairie, Zlikovsky, Tesla, and picked up the notes and pushed it forward. And so, but the interesting thing is, I kind of talked about earlier, these dual tube plasma energy systems are inscribed in hieroglyphics and pyramids. So it's very clear that we're rediscovering technology that was being used thousands of years ago. I don't know if you're aware, but there was recently a discovery made that under the Khafra pyramid in Egypt, there's 12 cylinder with spirals that are going down 2,500 meters underneath these pyramids supporting them.
Wow.
And that clearly was not being done with sticks and stones. I mean, there is just no way that you're rolling logs and building holes that are almost, half mile deep. So there was clearly very advanced technology back then. And we can get into some of that as well. But I think that, like I said initially coming on, you cannot talk about the future and the Medbed technology without talking about the present and also the past. And they're all intersecting together, because as we develop the technology today, we're understanding that we weren't the first ones that were messing around, that were using it.
Wow, just so much. I'm trying to keep up with you with all this incredible information. Just quickly, I know on Tesla, when he was alive in the early 20th century, was not well received by the establishment. As a matter of fact, they burned down his lab, and much of his information was lost. But I would like to go back to Medbed. I just have to say, the very first time I've ever heard about a Medbed, and I've had, like I said, many channels on this show. I had a guest on the show who channeled Ashtar, the commander of the intergalactic starship that hovers over Earth. And Ashtar talked to me about the use of the Medbed. I mean, how did this technology finally come to humans, and why are they not in every hospital in the world then?
I'm glad you brought up Ashtar, because like I said, you can't, the real quote unquote, the real med beds, and I'm not saying there aren't med beds now, we've got some powerful technology, but the real term med bed actually comes from off-planet based technology. Right. And Ashtar, and there's a lot like that whole subject with disclosure is simultaneously being interwoven into the medbed technology, because it's very difficult to talk about medbed technology without getting into extraterrestrial subjects and what I just generally term off planet. And if you understand the history of the pyramids, you understand that the pyramids were initially built to stabilize the Earth's atmosphere. There was a time where there's something called the Kuiper Belt. That was actually not just a bunch of asteroids spinning in a circle. It was actually a planet. The story goes that the extraterrestrials were having a battle and they blew up that planet and just turned it into asteroids. And so there was a lot of unstable things going on within the atmosphere. And so the pyramids initially, when they built those, were being built to stabilize the Earth's atmosphere. They were also really made also to germinate seeds. But there's a gentleman named Sam Brozanovich who runs the excavations under the Bosnian pyramid, which is larger than any of the ones that are actually in Egypt. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of miraculous healings that have been reported coming out of those chambers underneath there. So the plasma medbed systems, the ones inscribed in hieroglyphics, were theoretically, technically being used to regenerate the ancients, as we might call them, but the extraterrestrials that came down that started building these, because their bodies were not, they weren't doing real well in the Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere was not conducive to their body type. So they were using these plasma-based energy systems to basically regenerate their bodies. And when you get into the plasma subject, and I'll touch on that quick and then I'll get to the next part of your question, but plasma is the fourth state of matter. Plasma is basically what happens to gas when gas gets hit with a lot of energy. And the sun is plasma, lightning is plasma, thunderstorms are plasma. This is all plasma energy fields. And so Tesla, there's many pictures, famous ones, where he's reaching out on both sides and basically becoming conductive for a bolt of electrical energy to go from the left hand to the right and back into another one of his devices, namely, I believe, an oscillator in a lot of the photos that I've seen. But these plasma energy technologies are really what a lot of these Ashtar and a lot of these really advanced civilizations. And I have to understand that the extraterrestrial subject, you're dealing with civilizations that are hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of years more advanced and more developed than we are. And you have, malevolent and benevolent ones that kind of all have their own things going on, off planet. But, these technologies really have not reached us. Now, there's a lot of technology that's reached us. We have a lot of very powerful stuff. I can show that to you, shortly, but it's not here yet because we're not in a time frame and we're not in a situation right now where it's being welcomed with open arms. I mean, theoretically, we're in a situation right now where negative entities, negative ETs have kind of had their thumb on this planet for thousands of years. And we're starting to kind of break out of it, but it sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You do not break out of it when you're in a mode of frustration, fear, anger. The only way you break out of that control mechanism is getting yourself into the 432 loving hertz, which is the most powerful frequency of all the frequencies out there. 432, which is love and compassion, is the ultimate frequency. It's a frequency that you generate and can build. So if you can give out kind words and be a loving person, that love comes back to you. And it's almost like a toroidal field. You start developing an energy field around you that's loving and compassionate. And people can actually come into that energy field and feel, wow, there's something about this guy that I can feel. And you can sense that. And for any and all of us that are history buffs, that are history buffs for the Bible or Buddha or any other religious thing, you'll find that anytime there's mention of being in the presence of an angel or in presence of Jesus or in the presence of any great spiritual person, there's always that part that melts you because you get into that loving field, that white light, that loving energy field. And so if we know that that's where we are, if we know that that's our true inner self and we can develop that, then, all these other, like we talked earlier, all these other energy fields or all these other technologies sort of aren't quite there. But we still are, that's really what we're trying to do right now, is we're trying to get out of that anger, frustration, me against you, you think this way, I think that way, like that whole craziness that's being programmed into us is the binding glue that is preventing us as a civilization from having these technologies introduced, because we still have to grow up as a population, as a civilization. In the world of the extraterrestrials like Ashtar, we are considered kindergartners, and we're still fighting with each other in the sandbox, and we're still, throwing toys at each other. And, it's a much more serious thing. I don't want to make too light of it, because it's actually quite sad, and it's actually quite, distressing to know that fellow people are suffering. When it's all said and done, I'll tell you a quick story and then I'll let you get back. But one of the greatest moments of my life, I have a goddaughter she's 16 in a couple months. These little kids grow up like, weeds. But back in the day, when she was younger, me and her mom took her to we went to Disneyland, right? We went to Disneyland in Orange County. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there one day and we were getting something to drink or whatever we were doing. I'm sitting there with her mom and with her, and I'm with her grandma, and we're having the best time. And our whole thing was all about giving this kid a great memory, a great experience, right? And I sat down and I looked around and I saw people from all over the world. I saw people from India. I saw people from the Middle East. I saw people with Asian descent. I saw Mexican. I saw every different population base. And we all had one thing in common. We all had kids, and we all loved those kids, and we all wanted the best for those kids. And we all had that core value in us. And I looked at that and I said, wow, this is really profound. This is really a profound thing. This is what we're missing, is we're being segmented out, and we're not seeing the true part of what we all have in common. We're trying to be exploited for the differences. And I think that, in life, if you can understand that there's really more that we're similar together than there is that we're different, and you get back to those core-based values, I think that's, we keep talking the technology, and I keep circling it back to other things, but I feel like that is what we really need. If you really want the Medbeds, be a loving and compassionate person. Be the person that is what you talk about, right? I'm just going to, I get a little feisty. I hate it when people say, I'm a this. I hate it when people say, I'm a that, because I'm a person that's going to judge you based on your actions and not on your words. I want to see how you live on a day-to-day basis being a compassionate person. I do not need to hear anything about it, because ultimately, whatever your background is, whatever your belief system is, it's going to come down to how you live and breathe and how you behave as a human being a loving and compassionate person. I want to see it. I don't want to hear it. The minute I start getting people throwing adjectives out, talking about I'm this, I'm that, I'm immediately tuned off, thinking, I know why you're telling me that, because I probably won't know that by spending the next hour with you. And I'm not saying that's always true, but I feel like we need to dial into that. We need to get into the 432 hertz. We need to be loving, compassionate. Let somebody in that needs to get across the road. Let somebody in that needs to merge into your lane. Get the door for somebody. Think of things, 2, 3, 4 things you can say that are loving and compassionate to somebody that you care about, that you don't even know. Lift somebody's day, give them a compliment. If you see somebody's having a bad day, say, hey, it'll get better, but I'm sending you a big hug over the phone, or whatever it might be. Be what you want the reality to be. And when you see that, and we can develop as a species, as a civilization, the Medbeds will be here, because the one thing that's holding it all back is us interlocking and arguing and fighting and buying into the kind of being bought into by the reality that's being pushed upon us, which is really not our true selves.
Wow, that is amazing. We are talking to Sean Callahan, a purveyor of many alternative healing methods that isn't generally known to the public, but also supplies traditional healing technology to hospitals. Sean, time is flying by here, and so I'm just amazed. I love how you're not locked in that technology is the be-all, do-all, and that we have to combine it with the human compassion and love and truth and intelligence. And with that, I've got one more thing on alternative healing here. And again, as I mentioned, that I've had many guests who have channeled information like this. Another form of healing I learned about came from Athela, which is a being, a 12th dimensional being from Sirius B galaxy, channeled by Christina Hill. They talk about the Sirians using plasma. I understand that plasma technology, you use it, but what is plasma and how does it work? And forgive me if we could make this a little bit brief and you could tell me a little bit more about the plasma.
Okay, so that's really, I'm glad we're finishing up with that. So what I'm actually showing you right now is the most powerful, what I would call a medbed technology on the planet Earth. This is a dual tube plasma energy system called Phi-Ray. And basically Phi-Ray, what it's doing is there's two globes on each side, two plasma globes. Each one of those is basically running frequency sets. Now those frequency sets are sending themselves into the middle. And this is basically a kind of a buildup of the multi-wave oscillator from Tesla, except we're using plasma. But what's happening there is when they implode in the middle, they're basically creating a plasma energy field. And plasma is what your consciousness is composed of. Your soul and your consciousness is plasma energy. And so plasma is a very powerful modality to use when it comes to anything related to healing. But these dual tube energy systems, basically what happens is that when this system gets going, it basically, the plasma energy field that's created becomes toroidal, meaning that it kind of starts taking on the shape of a heart. And as it does that, what's happening is that it's actually becoming a mindful and intelligent energy field. So I'm going to just say that one more time because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but you're actually sitting now in a mindful and intelligent energy field. So like I said, the sun is an intelligent energy field. Now there's a computer off to the left that runs a bandwidth of frequency sets into the body. So you're getting this massive bandwidth of frequencies also coming into the body. And this system is very powerful. We've seen some, really amazing things coming from it. And this is really where the extraterrestrial technology is going. It's systems like this that are, much more powerful. But this is truly medbed type technology. When you're talking about, and it can work on so many different things. But when you start talking about being in a mindful and intelligent energy field, you really are getting into a layer of physics and a layer of technology that's very, very advanced. And so to summarize it once again, medbed technology is simply energy and frequency-based technology that's designed to enhance cellular function and cellular reproduction or whatever it might be. It's going to work on multiple different levels. You can see over here, there's another quote unquote medbed. This is a celestial, we call that the celestial pod. That's got 8 modalities in it. Even though it's a pod, like the technology can be stripped out of the pod. You really don't need the pod. You kind of need the juice that's running the whole thing. That's really the system itself. And therefore, even though this one behind me is a pod and it's got terahertz frequency, gyrotherapy, chromotherapy, red light therapy, it's got 7 different technologies. The plasma system to my left, that's not a pod, that are just these plasma spheres, because you can strip the technology. You don't need the pod. But that is the most state-of-the-art technology right now that we have found on the planet Earth. And this is a modality and a technology that's really not all that expensive, quite honestly. It's a newer version of previous technology that was more expensive. But, that is the plasma energy is where the whole thing runs, because that plasma energy is your consciousness. Now, I'm going to make this quick because I know we're running low on time. When you start using these energy fields, you start enhancing clairvoyance. When you start using these energy fields, you start getting into a higher frequency where you're more compassionate. You start becoming the ability to tap into collective consciousness. You start getting all these other metaphysical things also start developing. And therefore, medbeds are not for people that are just sick. These are good for everybody and anybody for maintenance. They are good for longevity. They're good for maintaining a longer life, but a healthier life. So, although a lot of people, when they start talking med beds, are really in deep water, this is about the everyday person getting access to various types of technologies, because it's all about us living healthier, longer lives. We do not want to have issues where, like I said earlier, a hip gets broke, now I'm on a cane, then I'm in a wheelchair, now I'm, whatever. We want to stay healthy and we want to live healthier, longer lives. So with that being said, I hope that kind of addresses the plasma question.
Wow, yeah, it's interesting, and just my quick comment on the plasma. When I interviewed Christina Hill, who channeled Othello said that plasma is like Jello. This is how we form our reality. You could just it's like molding a round of Jello, and what an interesting concept, and yet it has beautiful healing technologies. Sean Callahan, you are amazing. I mean, what you are doing for the world is incredible. How and what is the best way for people to connect with you?
So first off, let me just say I'm in Richmond, Virginia. All the technology that I've got here is accessible to the general public at no charge. So if anybody wants to come out, you're always free to come spend a couple days with us. We do ask that you set an appointment. You can call us. Our phone number is 804-495-0770. So we want to make the technology as accessible as possible. We just ask that, I can run around and talk to you and say, how you feeling? What are you here for? I like to document the case studies of the people coming through. We also have technology, which is a bioscan, which within 30 minutes, I'll know every cellular part of your body. I'll know everything going on with everything. And then I can start working on, different frequency sets based on what it is that we see. We have all this technologies available on our website, which is healthylifetechnology.com, healthylifetechnology.com. You can take a look at some of that technology. And then, I think that like with what you do, because I feel like we're very synergistic in what we're doing, and that is, we're trying to help educate people and get knowledge out there and really interview the people that are really the people at the forefront creating the technology. And so I do have our YouTube channel, which is the @ USA Medbed 369. So if anybody's out there and you want to, I suggest stay 3 days. We've got a hotel. It's a Marriott, real nice one. We get a very good rate at. We can set it up. I find that if you can get 3 days of the technology, it's usually going to get the best outcome, ideally. But everybody and anybody's welcome. We're happy to answer questions, and we're here for anybody in the general public that wants to come visit us.
That sounds fantastic, Sean. I might have to take you up on that, but I want to thank you for being here. And by the way, I will put all those links, that phone number, your website, in the show notes so people can access it. And Sean Callahan, thank you, brother, for doing what you do for the health and the sanity of the world. Thank you.
Carl, and thank you for what you do, because it takes a lot of time and effort to put these podcasts together, to schedule guests, to be there if something, gets switched. You put a lot. You're a very professional person. You've got a great history, a great career, and without people like you getting the word out, people just don't know. So thank you for what you're doing, because it's a team effort, and it's been a real blessing to be with you. I can't wait to catch up with you again, and I want to get you on our podcast so we can help, promote what you're doing, because you're getting some incredible people out there and sharing some beautiful knowledge, and it's been a real honor and a privilege to be with you today.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.